Great Dawn and Grand Rising, Cleveland, Ohio, 360 Info Network. We have a great show lined up for you today. Two very dynamic brothers who are members of the Kofi Piesie Research Team, and they have a brand new book out that is Volume 3 of the trilogy of books that they are doing that reflect a historical survey of the minds of African warrior scholars, to be exact. So we're going to introduce you to them, but I just want to make a couple of announcements before we start. One, if you're interested in becoming a sponsor of 360 Info Network, we'd love to have you join us, join this team. You can reach out to Stephen E. Boyd. His number is area code 216-526-1297. That's area code 216-526-1297. We have a few sponsors, and we are looking to gather more sponsors because this radio show needs to be supported by the community, and we want to do all that we can to support that effort. Also, just want to let you know, just keeping you up to date on what's happening with the allocations for artist funding based on COVID-19 funds that were doled out by the state. Arts Cleveland is currently going through the process of sifting through all of those applications. So they're in the decision-making mode right now. They are not going to announce who received the allocations. So you'll need to just stay tuned, and hopefully you'll get a notification in the mail or by email that you might be one of those awardees. So we'll keep you up to date as soon as we get any information about that. I know there are a lot of folks out there who were looking to receive some type of assistance. Today on the show, we have our brothers Sutekh, Akande, Iyanu-Oluwo, and Setepenre Meri of the Kofi Piesie Research Team. They have recently published a book. It was just released last Friday. It's called Spearitual Combat, a historical survey of the minds of African warrior scholars, Volume 3. And it follows a couple of publications that they've done, the first of which was Spears of the Mossi, a historical survey of the minds of African warrior scholars, Volume 1, and From Spears to Pen, a historical survey of the minds of African warrior scholars, Volume 2. And now we have Spearitual Combat, and spiritual is spelled Spearitual. And I'm sure that there is a special reason for that. On the line, we have Setepenre Meri of the Kofi Piesie Research Team, and hopefully we will be joined by Brother Sutekh momentarily. Welcome to the program, brother.
Thank you. Hey, how you doing, Brother Vince? This is actually Brother Sutekh.
Okay, it's Sutekh. All right, so Setepenre, you're also on the call as well.
Correct.
Okay, so we have both brothers. Glad to hear that. In addition to that, you brothers are involved in something called the Mboka. It's a family connection. It's a line of clothing. I get that out right. It's a line of clothing that you guys have done. So you've got a couple of different things, and you've been quite prolific in terms of publishing books. I know your brother, Inherit Sean Kalfani, he's published a book, and Kofi has also published another couple of books, and we're going to talk about all of those things. But let's get to Spearitual Combat, and I would welcome you to tell us what the idea behind Spearitual Combat was.
Okay, I'll go for this question. Spiritual Combat is Volume 3 in a series of publications that Kofi Piesie Research Team have been publishing. We called it Spiritual Combat to go with the theme of spears. We are African warrior scholars, so it's kind of like a metaphor. The spears are the correct information, and we go into war with anybody that is presenting or disseminating misinformation about African history or culture.
Okay. That's a very important point to make as I read through some of the material that you published, because one thing that I have noticed about you brothers is that you are very serious about getting it right. And I think one of the common sentiments that I hear is that some of our beloved scholars had access to information, but now you have access to new information and you have an opportunity to make the record right. And I want to talk about some of the things that need to be corrected, some of the misinformation out there. I think, Brother Sutekh, it could be you, it could be someone else, but the word pseudo comes out quite a bit in your conversations, and pseudo means false, and I know that there's a lot of false information. So again, we like to give you an opportunity to correct that. But before we go further, could you talk about the significance of the Kofi Piesie Research Team and its relationship to the Masi clan, the Masi warriors?
Well, the Kofi Piesie Research Team was started by our brother Kofi Piesie. He started Kofi Piesie TV as a channel of his own where he can put out information and present PowerPoint presentations. The Masi warrior clan is almost like a big brother group to Kofi Piesie Research Team. Two of the members of Kofi Piesie Research Team are also members of the Masi warrior clan, and that would be Brother Iyanu-Oluwo Sean Kalfani and Kofi Piesie himself. So he made the transition from Masi warrior clan first, I believe, and he evolved into making his own group of African warrior scholars, and that would be us, the Kofi Piesie Research Team. He kind of took the blueprint off of our brother Uncle Keck, who started the Amin-Ra Squad, a group of powerful warrior scholars in its own.
Yes, I have to concur with that. You know, from what I've seen in the YouTube videos and the things that you brothers have been doing online, and I find it quite refreshing to see brothers involved in intellectual discourse. I mean, there's so many things that we could be doing out there, but the more that you look into it, the more that you can see the seriousness of what you're doing and the importance of it, too. Because, you know, when they think about brothers in America, they always want to put us on a basketball court or a football field or, you know, on a stage, you know, rapping, you know, and there's more to us than that. And the fact that you are looking back, you're looking at history, you're correcting the record, it's just a very important endeavor. So I was reading through Spears of the Masi last night, and I read the chapter about the birth of the family brotherhood, and that the sense of camaraderie that I see about you brothers is also quite admirable. What I gleaned from that was that each of you has your own specific area of expertise, and you bring those things to light in the books that you're doing. So when you read the book, what you're reading is a collection of chapters written by different authors that deal with different subjects. We're going to be taking a break in a few minutes, but I just wanted to give each of you a chance to talk about what your area of specialty is, and we'll get into what you discussed in Volume 3. So, Setepenre, talk about what your area of expertise is real quickly, because we're going to be taking a break in about 45 seconds.
Okay, so I'm kind of like different. So like my area of expertise is actually Kemet, ancient Egypt. But in the volumes, I actually show how I'm diverse and I can deal with other topics. So in Spearitual Combat, you know, I deal with sun worship, which ties into Egypt just a hair, but I expound on other cultures as well, because ancient Egypt was not the only culture that worshiped the sun. And I deal with that in Spearitual Combat. Now, for Spirits Depends, I deal with a brother that was from Ethiopia who was a victim of the transatlantic slave trade, and he actually went over and conquered India. You know, he was actually called the Kingmaker in India. His name is Malik Umbar. Volume 1, I actually discuss human zoos and scientific racism. So I cover a wide range of topics because I don't want to just be limited to just one area expertise.
Okay.
But my central focus is Kemet.
Okay. We're going to talk about Sutekh's his area of interest, and I got some questions for him, too. And, you know, if we don't get to it during the radio show, we'll definitely get to it in the after show that will take place on Facebook and YouTube. You're listening to 360 Info Network. My guests are Brother Setepenre and Brother Sutekh with the Kofi Piesie Research Team. We'll be back with more 360 Info Network right after this. We're back. 360 Info Network on AM 1490 WERE. Our guests are Sutekh, Akande, Iyanu-Oluwo, and Setepenre, Meri of the Kofi Piesie Research Team, and we're talking about Spearitual Combat, a historical survey of the minds of African warrior scholars, Volume 3. Before we took the break, we were going to give Brother Sutekh an opportunity to talk about his area of expertise.
Yes, Brother Vince, my area of expertise is West Africa, primarily Western Central Africa, dealing with around the coming of Islam and the transatlantic slave trade. I also deal with a little bit of Moorish history as well. But, in Spearitual Combat Volume 3, well, let me not get ahead of myself. Well, yeah, that's my line of study is primarily Western Central Africa, dealing with the coming of Islam and the transatlantic slave trade.
Okay. Well, if you want to fast forward, you can talk about what you did in Volume 3.
Okay, yes. In Volume 3, I feel like the brother Sutekh. I wanted to kind of show my versatility a little bit, so I delved into science a little, and I talked about what eumelanin is. I know a lot of us in the community talk about melanin. So I wanted to give a scientific breakdown of what melanin really is, and kind of deal with it scientifically and instead of dealing with it mythologically. And I know a lot of the people in our community deal with it mythologically, like it's some kind of a superpower or something. So I kind of just break it down scientifically and give a more practical explanation for eumelanin.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that there are folks who have been aroused in terms of their curiosity by what you just said. So give us some insight on the difference between the mythological and the practical. Okay.
The mythological is, for instance, a lot of us think eumelanin, like I said, is some type of superpower, like it gives us some type of super strength or distinguishes us in some type of superior way to those of less eumelanin. The more practical explanation is eumelanin is basically nature's protection from the harmful effects of the UV rays from the habitat that our ancestors were indigenous to. The environmental pressures caused them to develop a form of eumelanin as a protection from the harmful rays. So, it's really nothing spooky about it. It's just nature's way of protecting us from the harmful effects of ultraviolet rays that our ancestors were privy to during their inhabitation of the areas that we come from.
Mm-hmm. So in the book, and in one of the books, perhaps not the third book, but I believe the first book, there was some conversation about the idea of race being an artificial construct. There was also conversation about how we developed differently based on where we were on the globe. I think there is a conversation about the original man and its relationship to Africa. But when we talk about people, some of the common terms that we're using now are melanin dominant and melanin deficient or melanin recessive. What would be your reaction to the use of those terms in light of what you just shared with us?
I would say melanin dominant, melanin recessive. Those are terms that's really not used in science. As far as race, it's not a scientific construction. It's actually a pseudoscientific construction. It's more of a social construct. So race in itself has absolutely nothing to do with science. That's what I would say.
Okay. And again, I think your statements are based on research that you've done. And when you look at some of the concepts that are out there based on information that was flawed or deficient or just false, as one of your brothers would say, or as you would say, it just seems as though there is a very apparent need to get things right. I'm remembering a few weeks ago hearing some conversation about the book that came before Columbus and some issues that were stated having to do with the research that Brother Dr. Van Sertima did, and I guess it was someone named Weiner, perhaps, that wrote a book or had some information that may have been flawed that Dr. Van Sertima based his research on. Could you talk about that as an issue and a need to correct that idea that Africans were here in America before Columbus sailed the sea?
Yes, it just adds to the identity crisis that I talk about all the time that the black community is in nowadays. We have brothers and sisters that want to identify themselves with Moors. We have brothers and sisters that want to identify themselves with Hebrew Israelites and Native Americans, etc. We have a whole community now, a whole movement who tries to connect themselves to the indigenous cultures of the ancient Americas. Mm-hmm. And for our ancestors to do the work that they've done, we have to get it right. Like you said, Brother Vince, we don't want to lean on the ancestors. We want to stand on their shoulders and further their work. So, yes, Dr. Van Sertima put out a book called They Came Before Columbus. The premise was to tie indigenous ancient cultures to African cultures who supposedly sailed here in ancient times. There is no historical, scientific, linguistic, archaeological, or anthropological evidence for this. I mean, Brother Van Sertima, he did what he could. We highly respect him, but we are here to further advance the knowledge. And he also used a Russian Jew. He leaned on a Russian Jew named Leo Weiner. So I know a lot of us attack Dr. Van Sertima, but as Kofi Piesie Research Team, we want to attack the source, the direct source of the information, which in this case will be the Russian Jew, Leo Weiner.
Mm-hmm. One of my dear brothers is Dr. Runoko Rashidi, who was actually a student of Dr. Van Sertima back in the day. And, I've had conversations with him and I've observed conversations that Dr. Rashidi has had online. And I think he's very earnest in wanting to have correct information. So I'm not sure that he would take umbrage to the fact that you brothers are doing what you can to get the truth out there. But with that being said, what is it that we should know in terms of the relationship of those who were taken from the shores of West Africa and other places and brought over here, and what was here before they got here?
I would say There is no connection to the ancient cultures that were here before we got here, except for when we did get here, these native cultures, these native indigenous people of these cultures, aka the Native Americans, they had us enslaved, just like the Europeans. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of us will say we have Native American in our blood, Cherokee in our blood. The reality of the matter is these so-called 5 civilized tribes enslaved Africans and those of African descent, just like the European did. And this is why they are called the 5 civilized tribes by Europeans, because they took on European culture, they took on European customs, and they took on the European form of slavery. So they enslaved our ancestors, and we, some of us amalgamated into their society. So this is where you get the, I have Native American, Cherokee, Choctaw in my blood, because when, after 1865, so-called slavery was abolished, 1866, the Europeans made the Native Americans in their slavery and make the Africans, or those of African descent, part of their tribes. And this is where you get the freedmen from. If for anybody confused about that, you can look up Cherokee freedmen and the case that they had against the actual Cherokee tribe to receive their benefits. And this is a case that just happened recently. So that would be the dynamic between the indigenous cultures and the Africans that were brought here later.
Okay. Brother Setepenre, I believe you indicated that your specialty is West Africa, among others, and we have evidence of Africans here in America in the Gullah and the Geechee. Could you talk about the significance of the Gullah and Geechee people who live near or in South Carolina?
Okay. Yeah, Brother Vince, this is Setepenre. I said my major area of study would be ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt.
Okay.
Yeah, we do got brothers that deal with the Gullah, though. We got Bassa. Of course, they're not on right now, but we definitely got brothers on the team that deal with that. And Kofi can tell you extensively about the Gullah as well.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's just not my area there.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the correction. So
yes,
in that your specialty is Kemet, and I'm sure that you're a student of the Meru Necher. Could you talk about the importance of the connection between Kemet and black folk in America?
Yes. Well, the reason why, let me back up and then I'll be able to answer that.
Okay.
So, like, the reason why I gravitated to ancient Kemet was because I was told, we have no history, and throughout the school system, they only teach that we were slaves. We came over here, and we brought you over here, and all this and that. So I didn't know about the greatness of Egypt. I didn't know black people were the first builders. You know what I'm saying? I didn't know black people were the first physicians, and we got the oldest manuscripts in the world. They don't teach us that. So when I started studying Kemet, I'm like, oh, okay, so a lot of the stuff that we do and we practice now, meaning European, but the culture over here in America, we was doing it in Kemet. We was doing it in Egypt. So I feel like the connection is there because a lot of the stuff they found, like a lot of the stuff that they found in America is based off Egypt. You know what I'm saying? Even the way they got stuff lined up over here, they got obelisks over here, all that type of stuff. So yeah, I believe we do have a connection based off the culture and how the European went over there. They stole from Egypt and then they brought it over here, and then they brought us over here as well. Now, I'm not saying that we are Egyptians by any means. I believe our lineage is through West Africa, but we are an amalgamation of a lot of different cultures when we come over here. So that's why I think the connection is with us and ancient Kemet.
Being a student of the Medu Neter, I'm curious to know what you have learned about yourself by studying this language. I mean, it's not it's not easy. I'll say that. I mean, because we've been so immersed in Western culture and the English language and so forth. But what have you learned about yourself through the study of the Medu Neter?
Well, I learned that learning more than one language will open your mind up, you know. So, like, prior to learning the written script, the only language that I knew was English and maybe like 25 to 30% Spanish. Now, I got brothers that speak English and Spanish, you know, fluently, but I just can only speak one. So, like, when I learned the Ronnie Kemet, it was like, man, like my mind it opened my mind up. And I was like, and not on no spooky, no pseudo stuff, but I was able to know what was going on in Egypt. Because like I said, when I first started out studying it, all I'm doing is looking at pictures. I'm looking at monuments. So I'm becoming amazed by this. But I see this text that I'm not, it's a whole bunch of pictures that, you know, I'm not able to, that it means something, but I don't know what it means. So it's like, okay, I got to try to figure this out. I got to see who I can find or something, because I know it can be done, you know. So I start digging. But once I start figuring out that script, I start figuring out what they were talking about. You know, you immerse yourself in the language, and then you learn the culture. That's the best way to learn a people is through the language. So once you learn the language, then your thought process is different.
Okay.
You start thinking different, you know. So that would be my answer to that question.
Okay. Have you had occasion to visit Kemet?
I have not. So I started studying about I started looking at it about 2012, but I didn't start immersing myself into the culture until I started learning the language in 2014. So I figure I want to have myself well immersed in the language before I go over there. And then, you know, once I looked at that ticket, I was like, yeah, I'm going to start saving some money.
Let me tell you, brother. Okay. Let me tell you. I went to Egypt last year. I prefer to call it Kemet. I'm just stuck on that. But I went there last year with Dr. Rashidi. I spent 2 weeks in Kemet with him, and we were all over the country, and we saw just about everything there was to see. I will tell you that it will be a phenomenal experience for you because you know what you know. When you're able to look at the glyphs, you're able to look at the Medu Neter and understand and know what you're looking at, it's going to be so much more meaningful to you. In the year that I've been back and I've had a chance to look at some of the photographs that I've taken and watch some documentaries and get connected and tied to the Hopi film movement and all of that, it's just amazing how much knowledge and wisdom is within the Medu Neter. So when you look at it from an informed perspective, I guarantee you it's going to make a lot more sense to you and it's going to mean more for you. I first went to Egypt or Kemet in 1992, and I stopped by the Great Pyramid at Giza. I went inside. I didn't really know what I was looking at. There was really nothing to see. I mean, you're just in a chamber that goes up to the top, and I didn't even know that it was there. It's changed a lot since then because now they have lighting, and you can climb all the way up to a chamber at the top of the pyramid. But brother, you are in for a real treat when you go. It's going to be so significant. So I celebrate your scholarship in that, and I'm just looking forward to hearing how you feel or what you have to say when you get back. I also wanted to talk about this whole idea of the so-called Arabs and the folks who are the caretakers of our ancient monuments. What can you share with us about who they are and talk about some of the racial disparity that exists there in terms of their attitudes towards us and how they've basically attempted to steal our history from us?
Yeah, so I can't. Well, what I will speak to is the history of it. I can't speak to what they're doing there now. Maybe you can, because I haven't been there. But you know, just from what I know, you know, the Arab came in and colonized Egypt in the early century. You know, after the Greeks had it. So, you know, they came in with their Muslim, with Islam. You know, and they've been doing that. You know. the Arab slave trade is way worse than the European slave trade by far when you study the history of it. And the Arabs actually taught the Europeans about slaves and the slave trade, because prior to that, the European was a slave. So with that being said, you know, the Arab comes in with Islam, and the Christian comes, or the European comes in with Christianity, and then it's a struggle for Africa. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You got the Christians fighting over here, you got the Europeans fighting over here, and these Africans, it's like, okay, you either convert or you get killed, you know, and that was the thing. And I even talk about it from Spirit to Pen about Malik Umbar, because he was a victim of that Arab slave trade. You know, they took him to Baghdad, and he was trained up there for 10 years, and then they brought him down to what they call they'll call it Southern India now, you know, but it was called I forget what it was called back then. But yeah, the Arab slave trade, yeah, and when it comes to Kemet, like so when you bring all that to Kemet, they've been fighting these people for centuries. They've been fighting them for centuries. So the Arab, they just came in and we talking about it now in The Destruction of Black Civilization, the book. Chancellor Williams, he actually breaks it down as well, to where it was an internal struggle as well, because the Ethiopians was going a war against the Asians, and then, you know, through Menace, when he brought the country together, you know, they adopted a policy of interbreeding and intermarrying with these Asians, and then it created what we know as the Egyptians, the mulatto, or the mixed breed of people. And these mixed breed of people, they weren't Asian, or they weren't what they would call African or Ethiopian in the book. They were a mixed breed of people, so they were kind of like the mixed people of today that we have in America. You know, we fighting for Black Power, we fight for Black Lives Matter, but you know, sometimes these people on the fence because their mom may be European, but their dad may be Black. You know, so this is just an internal struggle that's been going on, and you find it in Egypt as well with the Arabs. So they've been there for a while.
Yes. You know, I wanted to mention that, and I'm glad you brought it up, because I've actually been online when you brothers were and are going through the book by Dr. Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization. And I found that conversation really fascinating, you know, that you had a group of, let's say, I hate to say this, brother Sutekh, but melanin dominant brothers and sisters who were saying, no, we don't really want these folks coming in and mixing us up. You know, we cool with who we are, and y'all want to come in and do this kumbaya and all this miscegenation and mixing, but we ain't really with that. Could you talk a little bit more about that dynamic?
Yeah, so basically, like I said, man, the Arab and the African, it's been since the beginning of time. So, like I said, it started with from history. What we know, we start with Narmer, and when Narmer came in, you know, they say it was 42 nomes. The history tells us it was 42 nomes. He came in and unified it, but the Egyptians of Lower Egypt, you know, they were of Asian descent, because they would always come in. They would always come in and raid. They would always come in and pillage. And then you have the Ethiopians, or the people of the Sudan. I'll say the Sudan, actually. You have the people of the Sudan, which were, you know, a purebred stock, you know, and then they would come up. And even when the Egyptians became a mixed, amalgamated people during the time of Ramesu, you know, you always hear, if you read his epitaphs and stuff, you would always hear him talking about the land of the 9 bows. These were the people of the South, and then when you see them in the text, and they show you the Table of Nations, these people are a lot darker. You know what I'm saying? Like, they are a lot darker. So you could just, when you put all this stuff together and you just lay it out flat, and you put it in chronology, and you see the timeline, it's crazy. Because even with Mentuhotep, you know, he was the brother of Thebes. So Thebes is a little bit more to the center, a little bit more lower in the center of Africa. And, you know, he had to go up and straighten things out as well. Kamos and Amos had to go out and straighten things out as well. So you see this internal struggle of the Africans always fighting the Asians, and then they just became a mixed, amalgamated people through not wanting to war. And every intermediate period as well. Like, so when you see these intermediate periods, that's when the Asians of the North, they were ruling Egypt. Mm-hmm. The people, we had to come back and set it straight each time. But they would rule for a while. You know, the Hyksos, they would rule for a while.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about who actually built the pyramids, I know there's controversy about that, but from your perspective, was it black folk, Africans, melanated Africans who built those pyramids, or was it someone else, or maybe a combination of both?
Well, I would say, from my opinion and my research, and I studied Kemet extensively, the people there looked like me or you or Sutekh. We were all, because you talking about fourth dynasty, right? So these were mixed people as well, but they were African, but they were kind of, because this maybe like probably about a couple thousand years after Narmer unified things. So these people are not Europeans at all. These people are black. I don't know if that's what you was asking, but everybody that was building these pyramids, they're all black. Now, if the Hebrews say they want to say they came in and built the pyramids, based on that question, they were still black. I'm not saying the Hebrews built it. We know they didn't build it, but Africans built the pyramids, and if you study the pyramid, it started out as Brother Kofi break it down as well. The mastaba, and the mastaba is the Arab word for bench. So it started out with one flat building structure, and then they stacked them. So when they stack them, you got your step pyramid. And you're seeing the development of the pyramid, So these people were black. It started out in Africa. Go from the step pyramid, and you go to the bent pyramid. The bent pyramid, he didn't construct it right, but he built the red pyramid as well. So this pharaoh, I can't remember off the top of my head, but he built two pyramids. And one didn't all the way come to a point, so he went on ahead and did the red pyramid as well. So these are made by African people.
Yes. So
and these are all pyramids before the Great Pyramids are built.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and again, I was privileged to be in those pyramids. I went into the step pyramid, and we went up to a chamber, and there were the metal netcher. There were bats up in there. It was a phenomenal experience. So again, I'm really looking forward to your thoughts and your insights once you return. You're listening to 360 Info Network on AM 1490 WERE. Our guests are Brother Sutekh and Brother Setepenre of the Kofi Piesie Research Team, and we are talking about their book, Spearitual Combat. And we're going to dive a little bit more into that book and bring Brother Sutekh back into the conversation. We're going to do that when we come back from this break. Once again, 360 Info Network, Vince Robinson. Man, the time is just flying by. You're listening to 360 Info Network with Vince Robinson. Brother Hamtonio is out in the field today. We're having a conversation with Brother Sutekh and Brother Setepenre of the Kofi Piesie Research Team about their new book, Spearitual Combat, a historical survey of the minds of African warrior scholars, Volume 3. We spent considerable time talking about Kemet with Brother Setepenre. We want to shift gears and bring our Brother Sutekh back into the conversation. As I was reviewing the material, I was noticing that you have extensive knowledge of the Moors. So could you talk about the significance of the Moors, how they are related to us, and why we should know about what they accomplished?
Okay, yes. The Moors, well, first of all, Moor meant different things and different points in history by different people. So the term can be rather ambiguous, especially if we are specifying what time period and who we're talking about. But initially, Moor was used by the Greeks to describe the inhabitants of North Africa that they saw. And they called these inhabitants of North Africa black, not because of, not in the way like black that we use today in the modern Western world, but black in contrast to their very fair, pale skin. So these inhabitants of North Africa were Berbers, not sub-Saharan Africans. So the people that went up into Spain in 711 AD were mostly Berber, not sub-Saharan African. Later, you have some bands of warrior, to lack of a better term, slave warriors or slave soldiers to be recruited in the Moorish armies and to go up in Spain. That will be later. But initially, 711 AD is what, a lot of us like to talk about. Those were mostly Berbers. But, more is, in the historical term of, we're talking about European Christians, because these are the people that use this term historically, this term of Moor. So when we're talking about European Christians using this term and who they were designated, in the medieval time period, which our brother Ivan Van Sertima would call the golden age of the Moors, the word or the term Moor just went to mean Muslim from North Africa. And that would be regardless of race, ethnicity, etc. It was never used as a racial designation. It was never used as a color designation. It only meant the Muslims in North Africa, because these were the opposition to these European Christians in the medieval time period.
That's really interesting, because we have these conversations and these arguments about what we should call ourselves. Should we call ourselves Moors? Should we call ourselves Black? Should we call ourselves African Americans? Should we call ourselves indigenous? Just all these different conversations. And I think the end result of it is that we don't have any agreement. We stay confused about it, and we also stay divided. But let me take this opportunity to ask you, what's your thought about how we should identify?
My thought is that my thought is, first of all, that I should be the beneficiary of an entire people and the identity that they choose to go by. But I would say that we should all get together and come to a common ground for an identity to call ourselves. I know some people have an issue with the term Black, and if we're going to change that, I have no problem with it, because the truth of the matter is that was a term that we didn't initially identify with. We identified initially with our tribal affiliations. Black was given to us or designated to us by Arabs and Europeans. So I have no problem with people taking an issue with the term Black. African American, for me, it kind of fits, because we are descendants of West Africans, and we know through the transatlantic slave trade, we are amalgamation of many of those tribes and clans from the western coast and the central interior of Africa. So it's kind of hard to kind of give us all one identity unless we are saying African. And since we are in America and we're native to America now, we're our own people, we'll be African American. So that name kind of fits for me. But if people take issue with it, then we should all come together and come to some consensus about what we want to be called. And I know everybody won't all be in agreement. That's a fairy tale, but I mean, we can at least make some attempt towards it.
So in other words, we can have some unity and consensus whether we agree or not.
Exactly.
I hear you. I think about being an African in America, because I kind of relate as an African. So African in America fits me, but I know, it's something that you have to explain to folks who aren't ready for it. I also had another question that I wanted to ask related to that whole slave trade experience. and the fact that slavery was something that was very prominent on the continent. There were, slave trades in different parts of the continent. But there's this notion that the folks who were selling folks into slavery didn't have any idea of what they were selling people into. Do you have any thoughts about what actually happened back then and how Africans feel about that now?
Well, I know that in the beginning of this slave trade, in the beginning with the contact of the Europeans with the indigenous Africans or indigenous West Africans, I can attest to the fact that they as in the indigenous African royalty that were involved in this slave trade, they didn't know initially, but after time, once word got around what was going on in that region of West Africa, they understood what was going on. A lot of them continued, and a lot of them chose different ways to reject the notion. You know what I'm saying? So we have royalty in West Africa that did know and continued after the fact, and we had some that did know and they chose to do whatever they can do, to try to fight back and resist the slave trade. But initially, I would say they didn't know. It's no way if you haven't been experienced to this form of slave trade that you would know what would be going on and taking place. So once they did find out, some did continue to go along with it, and some continued or some resisted, and in different ways, different forms, but to the extent that they didn't bring any harm to the people of their kingdom and their society.
Okay. That's definitely something that we need to have some more discourse on, but unfortunately we're running out of time. But I would be remiss if I didn't give folks an opportunity to know how they could connect with the book. I think the central website is KofiPiesieTV.com.
Yes, sir. It's KofiPiesieTV.com. And we also have, for the clothing line, FamilyConnectedApparel.com.
Right. FamilyConnectedApparel.com. We're going to do an after show live on Facebook and YouTube after we finish this program, and we'll make sure that we post that information. You can also go to the 360 Info Network Facebook page and my Facebook page, and I will post links for those respective products. So just quickly talk about what kinds of things you have in the clothing line, and we can get folks connected that way.
Okay, family clothing, Family Connected Apparel. We named it that because it's a bunch of different brands that we're associated with or that we're in, all connected under one umbrella. So we have shirts, we have hats, we have backpacks, we have scullies, hoodies, we have fanny packs, and we have something for everybody. We even have leggings for the ladies. So, yeah, it's something for everyone. If you go on FamilyConnectedApparel.com, and we also have different logos. As I said, we're using all these brands and coming under one umbrella. So we have Kofi Piesie Research Team brands. We have Mboka brands, which deals with our family over in West Africa, to be specific, the Gambia. And Mboka means family and Wolof. So we have Mboka brand clothes and shirts and etc. And we also have Masi Warrior Clan brand items as well. So, we have a lot of stuff on there. We have a lot of merch. We have something for everybody. So,
yes.
You should, yeah.
Yeah, and in addition to all of that, you have all these books that you've been publishing. I mean, Brother Kofi, he did a book recently about the African experience and the musical instruments that are discussed in the book, and it's quite a fascinating read. And I know our brother Annie Harrod has also done a book From Cocaine to Consciousness. And he's got some other books that he's been doing. So this whole publishing paradigm is a very important step in connecting our people with knowledge. I want to thank you, Brother Sutekh and Brother Setepenre, for joining me online and on the radio today. And we're going to continue our conversation live on Facebook in just a few moments. I'll connect with you, brothers, but I want to thank you for our listening audience on radio for joining us on 360 Info Network.
Yes, sir. Thank you for inviting us, brother.
Okay. And to the listening audience, once again, if you're interested in becoming a sponsor, 216-526-1297. Reach out to Stephen E. Boyd. We'd like to thank our engineer, Tristan Sanchez, for bringing everything together. And we'd like to thank you for listening. Know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make it a great day, Cleveland. Peace.